Ever since first Commonwealth traders ventured beyond outer space and encountered a new nation there, no other race was more controversial than majestic Thadrakos. At one hand, they are violent slavers, not that different from universally hated Yannari, and just like them they are not against spilling oceans of blood in order to turn entire civilizations into their servants. But on another, they are also charismatic, creative artists, whose contribution to galactic culture and preservation of art cannot be understated. Using their charm and strength, Thadrakos families have expanded across the stars and formed a nation that completely dominates southwestern part of the galaxy, and, together with Commonwealth itself, may be the only power able to stand up to bloodthirsty northern savages of Empire or Dis. But just who exactly are these Thadrakos? Biologically, they are bipedal humanoid mammals whose DNA composition, to constant bewilderment of Commonwealth scientists, is nearly identical to human one. That similarity is manifested not only on biochemical level, for example a human from Ortus can easily eat Thadrakos food and vice versa, but also in their very appearance. Standing at around 1.7 meter tall, these humanoids are, aside from their pointy ears and golden eyes, nearly perfect copies of humans. Or perhaps it would be better to say that humans look like near copies of Thadrakos, for these aliens' appearance seems to be devoid of anything even remotely unattractive. Their skin is not marked by blemishes, their hair are shiny and strong, and even their voices reverberate on frequencies that immediately endear them to all listeners, regardless of their race. All these qualities earned this blue-blooded, quite literally, race a nickname of Space Elves, which saw even more widespread use once humanity learned more about their culture. For Thadrakos are not simply content with their appearance. Instead, their society revolves around constant, unrelenting pursuit of beauty. Every Thadrakos, be it a lowly grunt or mightiest oligarch, is expected to strive to become peerless ideal, an idealized version of themselves, free of any impurities and imperfections, an entity that would blind lesser creatures with its unbound magnificence. Ancient Thadrakos legends say that their entire race came from a pair of peerless ideals, but as generations went by, their species degenerated and became unworthy of the title. Whether this story is true or not doesn't really matter though, for its only goal is to push Thadrakos to constantly improve themselves, both mentally and physically, in order to, perhaps one day, regain true splendor of their ancestors. This results in an odd psychological profile that makes Thadrakos both vain and selfishly obsessed with their own appearance and status, but also permanently insecure. Each and every one of them knows that becoming peerless ideal is a monumental task, and even tiniest slip or mistake, or even random accident can prevent them from ever getting close to the coveted title. A scar on one's face, a sickness that makes one lose their hair, or even lack of natural talent for playing violin, all these and more can disqualify aspiring Thadrakos from becoming peerless ideal, and throw them into a spiral of shame and self-loathing. The weakest of them often take their own lives in dramatic way after such a disaster. Most of these flawed, however, simply slip into obscurity and become one with the preening, self-absorbed mass of Thadrakos society. But some individuals persist and, ignoring disgusted looks of those above them, keep striving to make up for their deficiencies. For one thing often forgot by Thadrakos of poor resolve is that resilience, persistence and unyielding ambition are also parts of becoming peerless ideal. In fact, the Thadrakos who united their race nearly 2 centuries ago, and became closer to becoming peerless ideal than anyone before him by doing that, was one of these flawed, and his family is now the greatest one in the whole country, with nearly 30% of overall Thadrakos population being its part or subsidiary. Now, this constant pursuit of perfection gave Thadrakos people an affinity for art in all its forms. From their youngest years, children are taught as many forms of art as they're able to learn: painting, writing, sculpting and, most importantly, music, a choice greatly impacted by Thadrakos' very biology. Their ears, as it happens, while only slightly larger than human ones, are nearly 4 times more sensitive, making them naturally gifted at all musical arts. On the other hand, however, they don't think highly about art of cooking. Again, an attitude dictated by their biology, namely a very weak sense of taste. Still, their affinity towards art makes Thadrakos highly cultured and able to easily form bonds with other species simply by appreciating their respective creations. For although Thadrakos may not think highly of other races, who they consider to be even farther from peerless ideal than they are themselves, they obsess completely over works of art made by other civilizations. Moving around Thadrakos cities, traveler can hear locals discussing finer points of Dostoevsky or Goethe while listening to Wagner or Tchaikovsky. On street corners, performers can be seen displaying Alir mute theatre plays, while on the other side of the street, a line forms to listen to Aramathi opera. Even if a nation is in open conflict with Thadrakos, like for example Viuri or Fenhalor, their art is always welcome, for it may be just what an inspiring performer needs to raise their social status. This fascination with art, which is nothing less than an obsession, unexpectedly turned Thadrakos people into galactic art curators, a development that they are very much pleased with. Even if these impure races should perish, they claim, their creative contributions will remain safe with us, the only ones who can truly appreciate them. Sadly though, that sentence shows that, despite their charismatic nature and appreciation of beauty, Thadrakos society is not one to be taken lightly. While they do not consider themselves to be perfect, other galactic races are, in their eyes, impure beings beyond their notice. During early days of their galactic expansion, Thadrakos tried to remain isolationist, hoping to distance themselves from other races who could not be farther from becoming peerless ideals. However, as they learned about art created by other species, Thadrakos gradually opened themselves to others, but as more emissaries arrived from other nations, the more families realized what, in their eyes at least, their role in the galaxy may be. In Thadrakos society, those who are considered too flawed to ever attain perfection are expected to accept their subservient role and support their betters, a system that is slavery in all but name. And now, with an entire galaxy full of those unfortunate enough to be impure, Thadrakos realized that they could completely abandon all mundane needs and fully focus on reaching perfection. All they had to do was to show these other disgusting creatures of the void their rightful place at Thadrakos' feet. If possible, these new servants should be acquired by peaceful methods, by buying them on Yanari slave markets, or by presenting very lucrative deals, either to governments of various nations or more shady groups within their borders. Should these deals be refused, however, servants were to be gathered by more direct means. There would be opposition, of course, for these races, backwards as they were, simply couldn't understand that they exist to help their superiors reach perfection. But Thadrakos are masters of all arts, including art of war. And so first raids and invasions soon began, with sole objective of acquiring enough workforce to let Thadrakos fully concentrate on their ever-elusive goal. And in these conflicts, like in peace, they strived for perfection. Their fleets were composed of ships that perfectly blended beautiful design and deadly efficiency. Opposition was treated without mercy, and soon hundreds of slave ships filled Thadrakos' walls with millions of slaves. Slaves who, quite often, were surprised with treatment they received. While Yanari are known to house their captives in filthy, disease-ridden labor camps, Thadrakos' slaves found themselves in ornate, well-developed and supplied colonies. Granted, they were still not allowed to leave and had to work to fulfill their basic needs, but at the end of the day, many captives from less developed worlds ended up in conditions better than they had in their own homes. Thadrakos' attachment to aesthetics caused them to treat their new slaves surprisingly well. After all, it would be unsightly for an ambitious official to be serviced by ragged, dirty servants, and for some time many captives actually enjoyed their lives under Thadrakos' rule, until their masters suddenly revealed the darkest side of their biology: cannibalism. Cannibalism, as a phenomenon, exists all across the stars, mostly in very primitive societies. The belief that, by consuming flesh of their foes, one can gain strength and wisdom appears with alarming frequency all across the galaxy, but, in the end, it is almost always detrimental, often causing both mental and physical degeneration. Not amongst Thadrakos, however. Speaking simply, their biology means that consuming meat of other intelligent races is the most efficient way for Thadrakos' bodies to gain necessary energy. The more developed the victim, the more energy Thadrakos can gain from them. This is not, however, restricted only to other species. If anything, eating their own kind is the most efficient way of gaining energy for Thadrakos, who can live for weeks after consuming just a single, regular-sized meal of one of their own. The very act of cannibalism itself is considered sacred, and refusing meat of another Thadrakos is considered to be one of the gravest insults among their people, a fact that does not help foreign ambassadors, who are often invited to lavish feasts. Still, now that other races became more readily available, Thadrakos meat became more of a delicacy reserved for special occasions. There are, after all, entire colonies of servants just ready to be processed in order to fuel constantly growing families. And finally, it's important to mention the families themselves, for it is their will that directs all Thadrakos people. Before unification, their home planet was divided into 4 oligarchies, each led by a powerful family. These countries were embroiled in a series of alliances and pacts, and constantly clashed with each other for dominance. However, after the unification war, another family, the Hatkan, rose to power and reformed other ones so that each of them would control one part of life, a deal that would make them all dependent on each other to prevent constant infighting. The Hatkan themselves took control of agriculture, a lifeblood of civilization, and means to remove all resistance simply by starving it to death. Javlan family took control of extraction, providing fuel and raw materials for the nation. Quensol family received control over industry, to turn said raw materials into goods needed by all. Sil family received power rights, and their power plants provided electricity for all. And finally, Hagen family became responsible for transportation, ensuring exchange of goods between other parts of society. But while control over civil aspects of life was divided, the military was commanded by leaders of all families together, with decisions being made by majority vote. And, surprisingly, for last century this setup worked as intended, and without constant infighting, the families united their efforts and turned themselves into galactic superpower. Today, their position in southeastern part of the galaxy is secured, but recent years showed that even combined might of all families may not be enough to let them survive invasions from the north, or confrontations with southern federations. Thadrakos leadership realized that their nation cannot stand alone all the time and, to their dismay and disgust, sent out a series of diplomatic missions to find potential allies in the galaxy. But whether anyone would like to cooperate with arrogant space elves, only time can tell.